Good morning, senior living podcast community. We have a special guest in the house today. Not house, but we're remotely from his office. So let's get going because it's a busy time. Because when you're out there shaking hands, talking to people, you're busy. So would you introduce yourself to our seniors and tell us who you are, what you do, and who you serve?
Yes, my name is Flynn Broady, and I'm the district attorney here in Cobb County. My job is to prosecute felony level crimes here in Cobb County, but more importantly, is to enhance public safety to make sure that everyone in our county is safe and lives in a great place. Um, and I support and serve all the citizens of Cobb County here in Georgia.
I love that. When I first, when I first met you at the Family Advocacy Center, I didn't even know who my DA was. I mean, it was like, and you said something which was really profound. Well, if you did know me, you're probably in trouble, and that's a good sign. So I said, okay, I'll take that one. So when we were at the Family Advocacy Center, I was really moved by your story. But before we get to that, tell us what is that about, and what do our listeners need to know about what that is doing for our county?
Yeah, our Family Advocacy Center is focused on helping victims of abuse, whether it be domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, sexual trafficking, human trafficking, any of those levels of abuse. It's an opportunity for you to have someplace to go where you can get the resources that you need to get away from your abuser, especially in the case of domestic violence. For domestic violence, most victims don't report the crime till it's the eighth or ninth time that they've been abused. And for some, that may be too late. But they need resources in order to get away from their abuser. And our Family Advocacy Center is designed for you to come in, get the resources that you need so you can get away from your abuser, remove your children from that trauma, and continue on with your life in a productive manner.
And I know listening to you speak that day to our seniors, I was moved, but I want to give our listeners a little framing of that. Like, tell us, I mean, it's on Fairgrounds. What was it like to put that together? I mean, to give our viewers, I mean, I know that it's not all, you don't find these centers all over the country. Why was it that you wanted to put that in our county?
You know, like I told the group that day, I grew up in a home with domestic violence. And I always wondered why my mom never called the police, why she never left. All those different things entered my mind. When I became a prosecutor, one of the first things I did was I went to a domestic violence conference because I wanted to learn more about it. And that's where I started learning the realities of domestic violence as a hidden crime in our community. And so often we see the escalation of the violence as people stay in those relationships to a point where somebody actually ends up getting killed. Um, I knew wherever these family advocacy centers were, most of the country calls them family justice centers. Wherever they're located, there's a reduction in domestic violence. There's a reduction in domestic violence fatalities. And when we had COVID in 2020, we had a spike of domestic violence here in our county. And so it was something that we needed to do to make sure that we could protect our most vulnerable citizens. And the other thing about that is most of these situations happen in front of children. And children grow up with this trauma in their life, and they become more prone to drop out of school, more prone to start using drugs, more prone to become involved with the criminal justice system. So one of the things that the Family Advocacy Center can do is it can remove those kids from that trauma. It can give them an opportunity to grow up to be a safe human being. Because, I hate to say this, but lots of times we grow up in those situations and that becomes our norm. We think that's what love is, and when a child thinks beating someone is what love is, it just means a bad road for everybody involved. And it's generational. And so a family advocacy center can break that curse and can put people on a path to a good life. And one of the things I always say too is, if you report the abuse early enough, if that person truly loves you, they will go get the help that they need so they don't continue to be an abuser. And so it's a big win for everybody. So I'm hoping that as we get the word out, that more and more people will use it, and we can continue to make the county safer and safer.
Yeah, I love that. You had said something during that talk that day that, when people are, let's say they're breaking the law, there's a history behind it. It's just like you can basically trace it. So when you see somebody do something, you look at the history. But with trauma, you don't have a history. Explain. I mean, I know you kind of explained it, but it made an impact on me.
When I
What
first
what are the
when I
challenges there for as a
Yeah,
prosecutor?
when I first started as district attorney, one of the first things I did is I looked at everybody who we had charged with murder, and I wanted to see if there was something common about them, to see, how did they get to that point. And almost every single one of them started with something small and just continued up the ladder of criminal behavior, except for our domestic violence cases. In those cases, we don't have a history or a recorded history of their behavior, of their actions, and then all of a sudden we have somebody that's been killed. And that's why I said earlier that domestic violence is like that hidden crime in our community, because most of us are ashamed to report it. Most of us are ashamed to let people into our family and see the inner workings of our household. So we don't report it. We keep it a secret. Women wear makeup. Men say somebody caused them to do this, or did do that, instead of taking ownership and responsibility for their actions. Um, if we don't do something about it, and that's where I go back to 2020. We have situations where in 2020 we had 12 domestic violence deaths here in Cobb County, 12, and that was 25% of the murders that we had in the county. Um, Last year we had 10. This year we've had 3 so far, and we actually had one this weekend. The young lady at Kennesaw State, that was a domestic violence situation. No, they didn't live together, but they were in a relationship together. Um, so it's these type of things that we have to try to see if we can uncover them and take away some of that stigma of what it means to go get help for yourself, so you don't become that abuser that ends up killing somebody. Because the sad part about it is abuse is about control. If you can't control them by taking away the money, if you can't control them by keeping them at home, then the next thing you know, you start hitting people. And then when you can't control them by hitting, it keeps escalating until it gets worse and worse, till at some point somebody gets killed.
Yeah, I know when I asked you that question, and I said, for the people that weren't there, if there was one thing that you had as kind of like the magic wand, whatever, what you would do to eliminate, you said that trauma, that
Mhm.
childhood trauma.
Yes.
So for you, how did you overcome? I mean, you were in that scenario. You're obviously doing very well. So how did you get through? What can our viewers learn?
Pete, one of the things for me, I look like my father. I'm the spitting image of my father. And whenever I used to mess up or do something, my mom would always say to me, "You're just like your effing father." And so I spent my whole life trying to be different from him. And I actually had a situation where when I first got married, probably about 3 years, not 3 months into my marriage, I was a soldier, young E5 in the Army. And I came home one day and I said something to my wife. I don't remember what I said, but the tone of my voice and the way I said it, she said to me, "You can't talk to me like you talk to your soldiers." And in my mind, I said, "Oh my God, I'm becoming my dad." And I said to myself, I got to enroll myself in counseling. And I did that. And it changed my life because it made me a lot calmer. It helped me to think about things before I spoke. It has had tremendous benefits on my life. And I was a very young man at that time, 23 years old. Um, so that's why I say if we can report the abuse early, if we can make that person get help and seek help, we can change the dynamic for families, the for generations to come, because it's all about, we tend to mirror what we see. When I talk to fathers, I always tell them, I said, look, The way you treat your daughter's mom, the way you act, the way you respect other folks, one day she's going to go out there looking for you. So when she brings a knucklehead home, you have to understand you're the reason she brought one home because she was looking for you. Daughters look for their fathers, sons emulate their fathers. So you have to be conscious of who you are as a person in front of your children. Because if not, you're going to either emulate the behavior they're going to follow or they're going to bring home somebody just like you. And so when that stuff starts happening to your daughter, you have nobody to blame but yourself.
Wow, that's good. So you said, okay, we're back where you're 23 years old. The thing about therapy, it's always been that perception, it's weakness, because I'm admitting I'm weak and I'm going to. How did you at 23? I mean, because your brain doesn't fully develop till 26. What made you like step out and say, I need to get help? Because that's very unusual.
Because
Take
I
us
knew,
back to that.
yeah, I knew I didn't want to be my father. I
Okay.
didn't want to go down that path. Everything in my life was, designed to be opposite of him, to make sure that, I treated people right, that I treated my wife right, that I did the things that I was supposed to do, not just bring home the money, but, show love and treat people the way they're supposed to be treated.
Yeah, now just to jump off the subject just for a little bit, you shared with us that day, and we have a special place in our hearts for our veterans. So that day you were sharing your story as a what level were you when you had moved up to tell that story? Were you a captain or
No, no, I was a first sergeant of Alpha 1 6 Infantry. And the story I was telling about, our experience in Iraq, we literally were in firefights and people getting hurt every single day for 16 months. So when I came back from Iraq, I had PTSD, and I started going to counseling, and it took me. I went through actually 8 counselors before I found someone that I connected with.
Mhm.
But I knew for a fact that I needed that counsel. I needed somebody to talk to, somebody I could express myself to that was going to accept me without question, without judgment. And I think I told you, Pete, if you were to see the two of us standing next to each other, you would say there's no way these two could connect because he looked like he came straight out of Woodstock. Um, but he had that way of being able to talk to me and relate to me that, I mean, helped me so much. It was just unbelievable. And I was with him for 8 years till he retired. Um, and I can't tell you how thankful I am that I was able to find him and connect with him. I still have his number now, so I can call him anytime I want to. But it was so beneficial for me that I always encourage veterans, stop thinking about the stigma, stop thinking about it's being weak. Because the truth of the matter, going to get help when you know you need help, that's a sign of strength. And people need to understand that it's like driving somewhere and you don't know where you're going, so you're afraid to ask for directions. So what do? You keep spinning around forever. But if you ask directions, you get where you're going, and it's the same thing. That's what therapy is. It's helping you get the directions to point you in the right direction for your life.
Yeah, I have a real good friend. He's now living in California, but I remembered the day I was in small groups with him, and he just was a trusted friend. And he had a very rough relationship with his dad.
Mm.
And it was, I want to say 25 to 30 years of therapy. And it was like that day he said, I'm finished. Not that he's finished, but he was finished his journey in therapy. And it was like 25 years. And so we think that we can make one little, like, meet one therapist. And if it doesn't work out, therapy just doesn't work out. And I always tell my friends from the restaurant business, they'll say something like, they'll have, I mean, it's like if you have a bad meal, you don't stop eating. You
Right.
just keep going. And there's going to be bad experiences in everything. So what would you say? Because I loved your story that you shared with us that day about no man left behind.
Hmm.
Do you have time to share that with our viewers? Because it moved me that day.
I talk about my judicial philosophy, and it revolves around my time in the Army. I grew up in the Army at a time where you couldn't get rid of people, you couldn't kick them out. So you had two choices: either you made soldiers out of them, you carried a bunch of dead weight around. And I was in the infantry, so carrying dead weight was not an option. So one of the things we used to do is we used to show some love, we used to show some respect, and just work with people to make sure that they became who we thought they could become. And I think the same thing happens with us in the judicial philosophy. Yeah, there's going to be those violent criminals that we have to put away for life. Yes. But for most criminals, they're nonviolent and they just need an opportunity to get the resources and the love that they need to be productive citizens. And I think that's what's critical here is when we talk about responsible restorative justice is as a community, what are we doing to make sure that those who come back to our community as offenders, that we're doing what we can to make sure that they can be productive? Because if we don't make them productive, then they're going to do what? They're going to resort back to going to crime. And so if we can make them productive, we can reduce our crime rate, we can reduce recidivism, and we make our community safer. And the thing about this is the research has shown that this works. But too much we've been focused on punitive versus restorative justice, that we continue to produce better criminals instead of better productive citizens. And that's one of the biggest focuses for me is for those who are going to return back to our community, are going to be part of our community, how can we make sure that they don't return to a life of crime?
I bet. I picked up the paper and I saw the Cobb DA candidate faces off at a heated forum. And I read that, I was going like, okay, so what's this about? And I always reverse engineer everything. So I'm looking at it and I won't mention the candidate, everybody will know. There was one case that she referenced to, and I always look at perspective, give our voters a perspective, because I don't want our voters to say one case, vote for one. I mean, you have so many cases going on. I mean, it's like, I'm sure it's crazy if you were to say what your schedule consisted of, but let's frame it in such a way, because I'm a big proponent of why a person runs. Mm-hmm. And I always see like behind, like, why is a person running? And I looked at that. My first impression was somebody wants their name in the paper. That's where I go. My brain just says there's got to be a reason. So kind of put a perspective on, what your role as a DA. You got to look at all this evidence. You have to look at the whole history of the legal system, and you got to determine, where you're going to put your priorities. So just share with our viewers a little bit about that responsibility.
That case that you're referencing is a great point on that. The case of the young child being left in the car, and the father neglecting and him being killed and him dying. When we looked at that case, they got a guilty verdict for murder on the original trial. The case went before the Supreme Court, the Georgia Supreme Court, and the Georgia Supreme Court said they reversed the conviction, and they threw out a lot of the evidence that was used to get that murder conviction. When we got the case back from the appeal, it took me 11 months to go through that case, 11 months to dissect it and say, okay, if we were to retry this case, can we get the conviction? If we were to retry the case, what would be the actual charge we could charge? In that 11 months, we concluded that the charge would be involuntary manslaughter. And that's usually the charge that's given in those particular cases. The murder in this case was an overcharge. The involuntary manslaughter carries a 10-year sentence in Georgia. If we were to retry that case and get an involuntary manslaughter conviction, which I'm sure we would have been able to give him a 10-year prison sentence. Well, he was already serving 12. So we were not going to get anything out of it because he would have got credit from the time he originally went in from the original court date, original conviction date. So we wouldn't have got anything extra out of it, but we would have cost this county probably another $1 million. $1 million that, we could have used that we are using other places. So that's why I made the decision not to retry the case. Yes, I got a lot of heat for it, But the fact is, financially and outcome based, we weren't going to get ahead of what we already had. So I made the decision that we weren't going to go forward and retry the case because the max penalty that we could have asked for, he was already serving. So that's why we made that decision. But I have those kind of cases every single day. Every
Mhm.
single day, we're sitting down and we're discussing with victims, we're discussing with defense attorneys about particular cases to decide what we're going to do going forward. Another case in point was when we had our two sheriff's deputies killed. We sat down with the victims. Our original plan was to go for the death penalty. One of the victims said fundamentally she was opposed to the death penalty for her religious beliefs and everything. Even though this was her husband that was killed, she was fundamentally opposed to the death penalty. And so we talked to the other wife and we said, okay, your counterpart here, she's fundamentally opposed to the death penalty. And so she said, well, as long as I know he's going to stay and die in jail, I'm okay with you guys not going for death. The day we did the plea, we had the death penalty paperwork in hand. So if he backed out of the plea, we were ready to submit the death penalty paperwork. And in this plea here, basically, he can't appeal, he can't do anything except sit in jail for the rest of his life. He can't even bring up the fact that, well, this was wrong or this was wrong. He can't do it. He waived all those rights. So basically what we did is we saved the state of Georgia a bunch of money because there won't be no appeals. The family will not have to keep reliving this incident over and over again. We have a death penalty case from 1976 where we just 2 years ago we went before the Board of Pardons and Parole about where this family, every time this man comes up for before that board, they have to relive this, and it's been almost 50 years. And I can't tell you how that affects a family to know that they have to keep going and going and going, and what it does to their psyche and their ability to move on when this stuff keeps bringing up. For these two young ladies, they know they will never have to hear about this case again. He will never come up for parole. He will never come up for a hearing. The next thing they will hear is when he dies in prison.
Wow. It's so important to know the stories because we are bombarded by information now and we're overwhelmed by the amount of information, but stories really do put context to things and a better perspective. So I just want, just for your sake, and if you ever want to come back and just share with our voters, share with our Cobb County what's going on, because we're so busy, we don't dig deeper than just, I had so many people, because I always ask, I asked a friend, I said, so did you vote? And he goes, yes. I said, so what were you thinking of when you voted? And he voted straight ticket. And I said, and he said, do you know why? I said, no, I don't know why. He said, I don't know anything about these people.
Right.
And he said, I voted for incumbents because if I did hear something about him, I mean, if I would have heard something about him, it was stuck out.
They would have
So,
registered, yeah.
yeah, because, like, oh, that person did this or whatever. So I think I always like that third party, which is the party of H, people with a heart, because we want people to serve with a heart, not that they were born this or believe this, believe that, because our mindset is so important to really find out what's behind the person, what they believe in, why they act like they do, because it really helps us serve in such an incredible way if we know those kind of people. So I want to encourage our people, because we want you to go out and vote. Your vote counts and your vote is important, but learn the stories behind people. Take the time to do a little bit of education so you can learn about people. You just don't want to go in and go hit the button and go out, because you just don't know. And even though we're busy, it's important that we put people in the position that have a heart, that want to serve for the right reasons. So As we close down, what would you say what would be the one thing that you would want our county to take home from our time on the podcast?
I think you just said it. It's important to get to know the candidates. It's important to do your research and your due diligence, because you want people with empathy. You want people that are focused on serving you and not serving themselves. You want people that are going to take all things into consideration, especially in a position like mine, because I have a right to protect. I have a duty to protect not only you, but I also have to protect that offender, and I take that duty to heart. I want to always make sure that I do the right thing, and that's what you want more than anything. Because if you look at somebody's past behavior, it can usually predict what their future behavior is going to be. And so it's important that you understand that if somebody has been shady and not done what they were supposed to do in the past, don't expect them to be shady, not to be shady when you give them the power to do so. So always make sure you're looking at the candidates, making sure you're looking at those people who, one, want to do the right thing, and two, are going to do the right thing, and have shown you in the past that they have always done the right thing. And I think it's important that you vote, especially at the local level, because at the local level, these decisions influence you. They make a difference in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that you have control of that. Somebody always told me that, the person up in the pulpit is the one who leads the congregation. But they have to remember that you in the congregation, you're the one who put that person there. So if you don't put the right person there, then they're going to lead you in the wrong direction.
I love that. Oh, so that's so good. So I want to thank you for taking the time to really talk to our seniors, because I heard from a little birdie, somebody that there's 770,000 people in Cobb County, and 100,000 of them are seniors. So it's a big block of people, and they always care. Because the older you get, the more you reflect on things that you could maybe have changed. And one thing you say is, I'm going to make a difference. And so we want to encourage our seniors to keep voting, keep getting out there and being active, because sometimes our younger people don't realize the importance of voting. The importance, our responsibility is to put people in a position to serve us. So thank you so much, DA Brody. We appreciate you very much, and we wish you all the success in the upcoming elections. And I would love to have you back, even at a time where we can talk about the Family Advocacy Center or somebody connected to it, because we want everybody in our county to know that this resource is available for us. So thank you so much.
We'll make that happen, Pete. Thank you.
Okay. Bye now.
Have a good day.
Thank you.